Hey everyone. Um, I was asked a lot actually to go into more detail in what it's like to have a Tesla in the winter and what's the battery usage like and how the tires are because I have the 2022 Model 3 Performance and it has the Pirelli P Zero summer only tires and it the other option of a tires for that car would have been the Michelin Pilot Sport PS4s, which is equivalent performance summer only tire. So this will be a short video because honestly, I think that there's so much talk out there how difficult it is to have a Tesla in the winter and the battery doesn't last and it's worrisome, you can't charge it or cold and all that. So of course there's extremes for everything, right? So if you have, if you live where it's constantly like, 6 degrees Fahrenheit or somewhere around that temperature, yes, you're going to use a lot more battery, maybe 10% more battery or so um, on your daily use of the car. And charging may take a little longer if you have a stone cold battery and you want to charge it with a supercharger. When you first plug it in, the first step it's going to take is going to be to warm the battery up and then start to charge it. It charges faster when it's warm. If you're gonna be like most everyday people, you're gonna come home, you're gonna plug it in, whether it's in the garage or outside, and next morning you'll come out, unplug it, and go on with your day. Doing it that way, there's two significant advantages, which is I think the use case for most people. One, you can program the car, put a schedule on the car per location, by the way, that you want it to be warmed up by a certain time. I have that in my car here. I'm in this northeast Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, and we haven't had crazy winters. We did have a week of super cold. I'll get into that a little later. And you plug it in. Mine scheduled at 7:30 to be uh, warmed up by then. So he warms the battery up, he warms the interior up, seating surfaces, the seats and the steering wheel, and you're ready to go by the time you get out there. So if you do that when your car's outside, it's even better because it'll be colder outside, so it'll be super convenient, and you don't use the battery because it's plugged in. And so when you get there, when you use your car, I haven't noticed any real difference between super cold and normal driving. Of course, in super cold weather, you have less traction with your tires. The summer tires have a little less traction, more noticeably than an all-season tire. Sometimes you back out of the garage and kind of skip a little bit. It sounds like a thump in a front suspension. It's just the tire skipping a little bit. It doesn't really happen in the street driving. Acceleration might be a little bit less because of a little less traction, cold battery, but nothing that stuck out to the point that I was concerned or where I thought, wow, this is not a good car for the winter. My overall experience has been it's better than my previous cars for the winter because of the warming up feature without having to running the engine, get the engine warmed up. There's nothing to do like that. It just warms up, and that's pretty much all I can think of. Is as far as cold weather driving. I did have it out when it was 6 degrees out, a little bit, for all day for that week that we had the cold snap, and I used maybe 3 to 4% more battery, probably because of the backup electric heater. It has a heat pump that is 99% of the heating that I do is through the heat pump. You can hear it running and all that. It just sounds like an air conditioner running because that's what it is, running backwards. But when the electric backup comes on, I don't know. It doesn't tell you. But I imagine 6 degree days it did come on. There was a little bit more consumption. I didn't notice anything else. And then as far as the tires go, the performance tires I haven't had a chance to drive it in the snow because it hasn't snowed this year. But we did have freezing rain, and in the freezing rain it was totally fine. It was well, the road was frozen, the driveway was frozen, so it's totally fine means I was able to accelerate because it's got an amazing all-wheel drive system, the dual motor, and then stopping and turning on ice. You can imagine it didn't really want to do either one of those, but it did. ABS was really good. Um, just gotta give it more space. It wasn't a complete sheet of ice. It was just icy driveway mostly and a little bit of icy roads. But it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, like any car with, any kind of tire on ice is gonna be compromised in performance unless you have studded tires. So can't say much about what it would be like in the snow until we actually get some snow. But overall, it's not a big deal. I didn't see any issues. We haven't had, constantly 6 degrees, 0 degree, negative 15 degrees, whatever. We don't get that kind of weather around here that often. Well, nothing ever, almost never in a negative. But I don't know. I wouldn't worry about it. The car is designed for that. And when you go to the opposite extreme, in the extreme heat, I had it out in the summer, close to 100 degrees a couple days. Drag raced it 13 times in a row, back to back, hot lapping the car. Basically finished a quarter-mile run, came back around, got in line, 2-3 cars in front of me, went again and again and again. I did not have it on track mode because that's for cooling the battery down for going like on a autocross or a road race, that kind of thing. Drag racing, you want a hotter battery. But I did put it on track mode a couple times between runs just to see what the temperatures were, because it shows me the temperatures of the batteries, brakes, engines, and motors and all that. And the rear motor turned to an amber color from green for a few minutes, then it went back down to green, and it was never hot. It was perfectly fine. And I got to the track from a supercharger at 100% charge. By the time I got to the track, it was like 98%. I ran it down probably 74 or 72. Might have been a little bit less performance by the time I got into the 70s, or below 75. But I had 13 runs in one night. Nobody else in that track had 13 runs. They were doing 2, 3, 4 runs, and they were waiting like hours in between runs to cool their cars down with ice bags on top of their superchargers and intake manifolds and all that, to try to get their car down, the heat down. And I even joked with some of the guys in the Mustangs, saying, hey man, let's race again. Because I raced some guys that had like 800 plus horsepower Mustangs. Of course I lost. You can see that in my videos. GT500, that was all souped up and stuff. And I said, hey, let's go back to back. Let's hot race it and hot lap it. And they wouldn't do it. They had to cool down between runs. I wonder what would have happened in the second run. And I wonder how much time they would have lost with the hot engine. I didn't have any loss. The car ran 11.3, 11.4s all day long at about between 117 and 120 miles an hour. Every single lap. It was a bracket race car. In fact, I even entered it in a bracket race. And apparently I was scored incorrectly in my second run. So I was eliminated, but according to people who I have talked to who have done bracket racing for years and years and years, they said I was scored incorrectly because I was within one. We both beat our dialed in time, but mine was within 1/1000th of a second of my time. His was within a couple of tenths. So because we both lost, but I was closer to my time, I should have won. But he got the win because he crossed the line first. I don't know what the rules are to that detail. I don't know which is right, which is wrong. But you got to learn the car, and I changed my time for that race that I shouldn't have, because if I hadn't changed it, I would have won. And I had 2 more races. I could have won the whole thing. So not because it's the fastest car, because it was super consistent, and they are super consistent on the drag racing, which is really, really cool. So anyway, that's getting away from winter driving. So yeah, I don't have much more to say about winter driving. It's to me, it's not an issue. And if you have it stone cold sitting outside in 0 degree temperature and you got a 20% battery charge, and you have to go to supercharger to charge it, you put it in your navigation, that's where you're headed. You pick a local supercharger, it'll warm the battery as you're getting there. And when you get there and you plug it in, it'll already be warm and you'll charge relatively quickly. Probably not as fast as a summer charge would be, but still. So if you have any other questions, concerns, comments, even video ideas or whatever, anything you want to know, let me know. This is fun for me. I'm not a professional YouTuber. I'm using a GoPro camera, the same one I use in my drag race videos, and probably get maybe one more or borrow my daughter's or something to have a couple of different views. I'm planning on going back to the track on March 3rd for street racing night. We'll see who shows up. We'll see how cold it is. Warmer is better. So maybe we'll see you then.